Good afternoon to you once again. My name is Elvis Wambura. I'll be moderating this session, and sorry for starting a little late. We were having panelists who joined in a bit late and other guests. And so at this level, we would want to officially start this conversation, a conversation that is held courtesy of Center for Multi-Party Democracy, CMD Kenya. And even before we delve deep into the conversation, at this juncture, I would like to invite our hosts who are CMD Kenya to give the introductory remarks. Thereafter, we shall proceed to the topic of discussion. So I'd just like to invite Mr. Range Mwita to make his introductory remarks on behalf of CMD Kenya, and also introduce any other member from CMD Kenya who might be on call before we kickstart the conversation. So karibu sana, Mr. Mwita.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bwana Moderator Elvis Wambura, for this opportunity and also for being part of this conversation. We are glad to have you all on this particular call. We've set up this conversation to be able to provide a virtual platform for young people to have a conversation around issues affecting them, being the biggest demography that we have, and in particular to look at, reflect on elements of the Finance Act that was passed 2 weeks ago, and to see what are the opportunities that young people really can derive from this particular piece of legislation, what are the hindrances, but most importantly, to reflect on the accountability mechanisms, to see that whatever has been provided for in law is actually trickling down to benefit young people across the country. Some of the challenges that we've had as a country is that we always have some very good policy proposals, pieces of legislations, but when it comes to actualizing the same, it becomes a challenge. I know when you look at, for example, the concept note that was shared by my colleague Mbuvi, it is clearly stating that there are provisions in that particular piece of legislation in terms of real money that should go to promote young people's interests, and also not only interest, but also their development of young people. But the question we need to ask ourselves, yes, we have these particular provisions. What shall we do to ensure that that particular resource even if it is 1 shilling, is used in a very accountable manner to benefit the young people of this country. So CMD Kenya is convening this particular session to give you that opportunity to reflect on that and draw very concrete resolutions, so that when we're engaging going forward, we are engaging from a point of information and also engaging other young people, not only from Nairobi, but also other counties that we are working in, to ensure that we are advancing an agenda that is collectively shared between and amongst ourselves. So I wish you well. On call here, I have many colleagues from CMD, and also from the political parties, the civil society organizations that are going to inform this conversation. So thank you so much. I will want to leave it at that particular point, and hand it back to you, Elvis, or Mbuvi, to continue with the discussions of the day. Asante sana.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mwita, for that introductory remark, and of course, bringing the members to speed on what are the objectives and expectations of this conversation, which I believe is a very timely conversation and one of its kind. CMD Kenya pioneering in this kind of conversations, where they are giving the young people a chance to talk freely and express themselves on pertinent issues that affect our day-to-day lives, and particularly the bull in the house, which has been the Finance Act, which was previously the Finance Bill. Adrian Wasanga, what's happening here? Everyone is silent. I don't know whether anybody else can be able to hear us.
I can hear you.
Okay, I think Adrian should check on their connectivity or something, because just saw a message that he's not hearing. And so that is basically why we are here today. And to lead us in this conversation, we'll be having an exciting panel that will have a chance to help us digest some of the particulars, especially of the Finance Act, which is now a law but has been contested in the courts, as well as the budget statement that was read out under the bottom-up economic transformation and climate change mitigation theme. So these are the things that we want to highlight on and delve deeper into. And just to introduce the panelists who will be helping us digest this conversation, we have Ali, who is the president of Lamu Youth Assembly. We have Gashuki Kariuki, the National Deputy Chairperson, National Elections Board, NAC Kenya. We have Mr. Joseph Owino, who is the Chairperson, University and College Students with Special Needs Association of Kenya. We have Joy Sharma, the Executive Director of Footprints of Hope. We have Bran Sengeli, Program Officer, Center for Minority Rights Development. We have Zach Nyange, Educator on Disability, Inclusion and Assistance Technology. And yeah, I think that is the panel that we have for today. And straight into the discussion, we'll have the conversation led by our panelists, and then later on we can have a plenary where we shall have all the other participants also contributing to this conversation. But again, you're open to use the chat box. Whenever you have a point you want to make, you can use the chat box so that we will be able to read the comments that you make as and when we move. This conversation is also live on YouTube. You can also share this conversation on your platforms, on Twitter, tag at CMD Kenya, using the hashtag BeHeard. The hashtag that you're using today is hashtag BeHeard. And when you do that, you can tag or mention CMD Kenya in your conversation. And so straightforward into the conversation, I'd like to bring on board Ali. And just ask a question. What do you make of the Finance Act 2023 and by extension, the budget that was read out by the Treasury, the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury? This is just an initial thought. President, Lamu Youth Assembly, can you be able to hear me? Looks like he has some challenge, so I'll invite Gashuki to make a comment on that.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. My name is Gashui Kariuki. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and also a member of NA Kenya, sitting as well in the NEB as a national deputy chairperson. Now, as regards the Finance Act and the fiscal year 2023-2024, first of all, the act itself is quite robust and very ambitious. First of all, the introduction of new taxing entries or entrants is a welcome move, but at the same time, the timing is off. This was not the time to bring up this Finance Act or these policies, these new fiscal measures, and especially that directly impact on a would-be very youthful population, and especially when you talk about the creative areas and digital asset areas. That is my initial reaction to that. I think it's a good act, but the timing is off. And on top of that, I believe the government did not, the executive especially, did not do a very good job in creating awareness while it was still a bill, before it was assented to law by President Ruto. They would have done a better job creating awareness of the same. And on top of that, effecting all the submissions that were made during the public participation time. That is my initial reaction.
Thank you, Gashuki, for that. And I have a guest here who is requesting panelists to switch on their videos. And of course, if you're in a position, you could switch on your videos or you're talking so that the people who are present in this call can be able to see and know that we are actually live. We are actually live people, not just robots speaking through the microphones. And so I'll just bring on board Joseph Owino, who also say whether, do you agree with Gashuki? She says the act is good, but the timing was wrong. And of course, a lot of other things that did not happen as was expected. Joseph, do you agree with that, or do you have a differing opinion?
Hello, Elvis. I hope you can hear from me very well. Thank you so much. I beg to extend from where Ms. Gashui has pinpointed. I carry on with the fact that we are still ailing as an economy. And personally, I'm Joseph Owino. Sorry for starting without introduction. I'm Joseph Owino. As you've highlighted, I'm the chairperson of the University and College Students with Special Needs Association of Kenya. This is an association that brings together student abilities within the education systems in the country. And so, going on to whatever my colleague highlighted, Ms. Gashui, is that we have an ailing economy, and looking into the plight of the Kenyan residents or the Kenyan nationals, you allude to this that things are not well. If we still grappling with the hunger, like when the Kenya Kwanza government took the reins of power, you saw they were like on a campaign to mitigate the hunger effect all over this country. And it never spared this time around that even Mount Kenya, which is always food-rich basket, was depending on relief food basket. That which has always been left to the residents who are inhabited within the northeastern region. And so we have the good plan, but it is rushed, because if you look into whatever proposals are being brought on board, additional deductions, a lot of deductions which are being brought together, component together at one given point. You having NSSF deductions increased, NHIF deductions increased. You having the housing fund, which initially was to be a levy or a contribution, quickly transitioning to a tax, and it's all in one financial year. This is going to burden that taxpayer so that at the end of it all, he'll go back to his, he'll go back to his place of residence with, with a payslip that has no value and, is limited in terms of functionality, and the purchasing power is, reduced or limited kind of. And so I continue, I also go with the fact that the public participation exercise was something that was rushed, something that also didn't take keen interest of a vast majority, because we look into how whatever the recommendations that were given, even in terms of to the committee, the budget and appropriations committee of the National Assembly, and looking into how they quickly transition from how do you, I need to be convinced of who gave them the idea of coming from a housing levy that they were bringing out, and now recommending that now put it as tax from 3% to 1.5% tax now, and like the levy that they were capping at 3%. And now funny enough is that we're having the 1.5 tax not capped, and you see the kind of the economies that come to play. And so that is my introduction.
Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. You seem to totally agree with Gashuki on that point. But I just want to ask Joy, maybe, do you think there are any hints? Of course, Joseph and Gashuki tend to talk about misses, but do you think there are any hits from the budget 2023-2024, besides the misses that of course have been highlighted already? Are there any hits that you see in that budget?
Thank you so much. I think I should put on my video, but my initial thoughts are we've got to look at it from both angles. And I think as much as there's a lot of misses in that Finance Act, right from the conceptualization to the time it became a bill to the time it became an act, there's a lot of loopholes that need to be addressed. But on the other hand, I think there is also opportunity for the youth if they are positioned well, and if the process or if the funds that have been highlighted in the concept note are really harnessed well to work for the youth, I think that is an opportunity for us. And also, I think the Finance Act tries to address the matter of youth unemployment. Now that the government cannot really bring out enough job opportunities for the youth, if these funds are utilized well, especially at grassroots level, they could be essential to the youth in terms of economic empowerment. So it has to be looked at in two ways.
Thank you, Joy, at least for bringing in the different perspective, of course, highlighting that there are two sides of the coin. We have the misses, but we have some hits as well. And I don't know whether Brian Sengeli has any different thoughts from the first respondents in this conversation. Brian, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, thank you so much, our panelists, and also our esteemed participants. So first, my name is Sengeli Brian, and work with the Center for Minority Rights Development, an organization that champions for the rights of minorities and indigenous people in this country. And therefore, just to begin with, when you speak of the hits and misses of the embattled, let me call it the embattled Finance Act 2023, we've had a lot of hues and cry about the amount of proposals, amount of engagements that happened, and yet we've had a lot of like the government took another turn, like the wrong turn, just to ensure that it adopts the unpopular bill and sending it to the president to signing it into the law. However, I would start by saying, when you look at the inception, when you look at the spirit of that particular act, the MPs actually passed it with view in mind that it is for the best of the country and not for the best of the people. When you talk of the best of the country, then it means that you are focusing for the long-term goals. Long-term goals, that means that they are looking at the economic prosperity of the country as compared to the short-term goals when it comes to for the good of the people. However, I think I would agree that we have some hits when it comes to some of the provisions in the bill. And if you go into it very keenly, you realize that the government has actually put in place significant amount of resources just to ensure that we uplift, mentor, and hone the skills, and also promote our young people so that we can spur our economic growth. For instance, when we look at the specifics of the bill, you realize that there are several provisions that the government has put in place to promote the economic situation for the young people. For instance, the government actually has put in place more than 10 billion in Hustler Fund. We also have other provisions whereby the government has also pumped a lot of money when it comes to youth employment and Uwezo Fund. And this is with regards to boosting our young people to grow their businesses, those people who are entrepreneurial in nature. We also have a lot of funds.
I think, Brian, I think we'll get deeper into the specifics when we get along in the conversation. I think for initial thoughts, I think maybe we'll keep it up brief so that when we get to that details of what has been allocated to the youth, we can then discuss it further.
All right.
Well, thank you for your input, and of course for bringing in a very important perspective of the long-term goals versus the short-term goals. Parliamentarians looking at the long-term effects or long-term goals of the economic empowerment of the country versus the short-term goals of satisfying the needs of the people. That is something we will also have a discussion later as we continue. I don't know whether the Lamu Youth Assembly President can be able to speak also and give us his initial thoughts. Looks like he's still having a problem with his microphone, so I'll bring on board Zach Nyange to also speak on this, giving us his initial thoughts.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me here. I am Zach Nyange Mwasi, just like mentioned, an educator on the area of disability inclusion and assistive technology. Currently working with Kenya Institute of Special Education as a lecturer where we train teachers and other personnel who participate on issues education, especially for learners with special needs in education and disabilities. Now, having said that, my initial thought about this would, first of all, be agreeing with the prior speakers of the fact that this bill, first of all, is not timely. It was brought in at a wrong time. Secondly, to also reiterate the fact that there was public participation, although very slim, my opinion, since many people with disabilities, for example, did not even have opportunity to share their thoughts and views about the same, especially considering some of the channels that the bill was passed through. So, them getting an opportunity to read, internalize, and even share their views, it wasn't done appropriately. And third, the fact that even after all what that was done during the public participation, and we had several groups, several individuals, expressing their views, especially to the parliamentary committee that was following on the same. I mean, when they went to now bring up the final product, it came with no any of those recommendations that were raised by the different speakers during the public participation sessions. So to me, I think that already is a very big sign to show that even what may be promised in the bill may also not be followed. If they may be ready to defy just a public participation opinion at this early stage, what about when now people have already contributed the monies and all, it's in their account? I mean, the chances, my opinion, I'm feeling that they may be very slim. For now, let me have that as my initial comment. But then, of course, mention that also I am a member of Disability League of the NAC Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you for those initial thoughts. Of course, expressing fear about whether the government will live up to the promises that they have made, bearing in mind that a lot of information was brought on board through the public participation forums, and some of them were actually not taken into consideration. And I think this has come out from almost everyone, the issue about public participation. And we'd want to have some little more time around the same. Public participation is a provision of the Constitution. As we all know, especially matters finance, this is a critical component when it comes to legislating or passing of laws that regards finances, Articles 201, 221, and 232, and also the PFM Act of 2012. All of them stipulate what should be done, and public participation comes out clearly. But now the question here is public participation was done. Of course, some of the recommendations, a lot of memoranda, according to the information we have, about 1,080 memoranda was submitted by different entities, civil society and different groups to the Finance Committee, Finance and National Planning Committee, which was supposed to inform some of the changes that would then go into the bill. At this level, Gashuki, do you think first of all, the space for public participation has been adequate? In your opinion?
Well, insofar as public participation is concerned, and you've done very well to bring up the issue of the Public Finance Management Act and the requisite provisions of public participation insofar as public funds are concerned. I don't think it is robust yet or well implemented insofar as the entire country is concerned. Take this, the Finance Act, for instance. I think and I stand to be corrected, but I think there was only one venue of public participation. That was in Nairobi KICC. I don't know if there was another one. I did not see another one. I did try to seek out, and I did not find any other venues for public participation. And in the 9 days, I did not see much of youthful participants. It was predominantly people above the ages of 35 who are in the manufacturing industry, and maybe a few mama mbogas here and there. I did see that. But we are not taking public participation as seriously as we should, and as young people. Maybe it is also something to do with youth apathy insofar as politics and governance is concerned in this country. You would see the same attitudes during the election and pre-election period when the IEBC was trying to register voters, young voters or youthful voters. Young people in this country tend to disregard.
Excuse me, Gashuki, I don't know if it's me or you are breaking. I don't know if it's my network or.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Maybe yes. Network. She has been stable all through.
Okay. Just wanted to know that. I can hear you now.
Okay. So I'm saying it, as far as young people are concerned and public participation is concerned, we're not doing very well as a demographic in this country. And it's time we take this as a challenge, because right now I know I'm operating from home as I speak. If I walk out here right now and try to speak to young people and ask them, okay, so what do you think about the various provisions in the budget that was read a few weeks ago, insofar as the youth are concerned? How much was set aside for Hustler Fund? How much was set aside for Viva? I don't think out of 5, 4 would be able to answer that question. So yes, we need to do better insofar as public participation is concerned, and especially in the various spaces we find ourselves in CSOs, in political parties, in government offices. We need to be able to ensure that more young people actually participate in deliberations and decision-making before a bill can be assented to law.
Thank you very much for that contribution, and of course, bringing a perspective here that there were not so many young people that participated in the public participation exercise that was conducted by the Finance and National Planning Committee. And Joy, do you agree with Gashuki? Is the problem the young people, or the problem is the government has not provided maybe working mechanisms that the youth can participate?
Thank you so much. I love to look at problems in a two-way traffic. And so, yes, I would say the government has let us down as the youth, but I would also say, what is our space? How are we taking up our space if we are talking about public participation? Because the Constitution is very clear in Article 118 that the government and the legislature, in the way they conduct their businesses, to ensure that there is transparency, public participation is very clear. Like, there has to be public participation in every process of the government, in every process of the legislature. And so I feel like public participation in this country is one of the most underlooked processes. Our leaders always take a predetermined take, and then the young people, or even the public itself, is not left to decide on fundamental issues on their own. Like, we don't have the platform where the youth or even the citizens of this country can really just give their opinions on something, be it the Finance Act or even another process that goes on in the country. And so sorry, I broke off for a moment. And so, as I was saying, in this specific process of the Finance Act, the Budget Committee, to begin with, which is supposed to be a bipartisan committee, it failed to directly involve the people. The committee assumed that other people, or the committee assumed that the public already knew what was in the budget. Like, we ran on the assumption that as long as people watched the news, as long as people heard hearsay from others, or maybe through their media platforms, the committee assumed that the public already knew what was entailed in the finance bill. And so I think it is a collective responsibility for all of us, the youth, civil society organizations, and even the government, to just ensure that public participation is something that is provided for in the Constitution. And so it just means that any process that we have to go through that directly affects the citizens of this country, we have to push for it. We have to ensure that we are holding our leaders to account in terms of just insisting we want to have these spaces. Because I was just thinking, I was engaging the youth in my village and just wondering, do you know about the finance bill? Do you know that it has already been passed? It's now a Finance Act. And do you know the space of the youth in that act? As my fellow panelist has just said, 4 out of 5 youth don't know. Honestly, some of them don't even care. And so even as we want to to blame the government for really letting us down in terms of public participation. What is our space as the youth in actualizing public participation? It has to be a collective responsibility as the youth, the political parties, groups, and civil society organizations to roll out a plan of educating the public and just making the youth and even the older generation to understand the importance of participating in this public participation.
Thank you very much, Joy, for that insight, and of course, always bringing the both sides of the coin conversation in such. I can see my friend is now back, Ali. I hope you can now be able to speak and give you a chance to give your initial thoughts in case you didn't hear what we were discussing about. It's just giving your thoughts around what you think of the Finance Act and of course the budget that was recently read. And of course, now talk about the public participation. Has it been sufficient? As a president of the Lamu Youth Assembly, do you feel that this process was participatory enough to guarantee the level of support that the young people especially needed to be able to interact and to contribute to the process?
Thank you, moderator. I think mine will be just highlighting about the Finance Bill 2023. The problem was, I think, the current government imposes the bill to wananchi as an expected baby. Let me say as an expected baby, whereby we were not ready for the bill. Most of, let me say, like 85% or 90% of youth were not ready to take the bill. They were not ready for it. But the coalition, or let's say the current government, insisted and pushed for it so that to achieve their agendas or to achieve their manifesto. But when it comes to public participation, it is whereby from my side, Lamu County or the Coast Region, there was no public participation that was done to us, and the public participation that was done by them, it was not enough. Because I think it is good for governments to push for public participation, whereby to reach each and every ward of the country, first to be at least Lamu as a county, then as a sub-county, then as a ward level. Because there are some things that I can share with them which are not satisfying the person who stays in other area of the ward or of the counties. So it will be good for government and it will be good for us youth to advocate for this thing, because Finance Bill 2023, let's say, like, for instance, most of these youth, first, they don't understand what is this Finance Bill. They don't understand what the bill entails of. They don't understand what is going on between the bill that is there. So for now, as the bill became an act and the president has said it, maybe we can just have if it is to submit the memorandum, I don't know, of doing what, going to court like the Omtata did, to ask the president, even though he will not recall the section, then at least to hear from youth. As I can say the document that was shared with us, I can see like much money was spent or much money was set aside to be settled for Wezo Fund, Hustler Fund, and other things. While, for example, this money or the Finance Bill, I was expecting the Finance Bill to focus more on youth, business partners, and small-scale farmers. But the bill itself focused more of we are calling it the affordable construction or the affordable bills. But for the matter of fact, the bill is not going to help me or to help any other youth inside Kenya. It will help only some of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would love to know, going forward, if you are President Ruto, how different will this be done? But let me bring on board Brian. And of course, Brian, a lot of discussion has been around public participation. Looks like it was not satisfactory. How different do you propose that public participation should be done so that then we are able to get to as many people as possible based on the conversations that fellow panelists have already started on? Then I'll give Adrian later a chance. I've seen his hand up.
All right, thank you. When you speak of public participation, you see, public participation, it is very critical, especially in any democracy, because it gives a chance for citizens to express their concerns and also take part when it comes to development of the policies that affect their lives. And it therefore allows the citizens to hold the government into accountable all the decisions that are made. However, it is also critical to ensure that the governance, it also reflects the aspirations and what's happening on the ground. However, when you look at the current situation, there's a lot of, when you speak of public participation, it's actually a matter of debate. Some would say that when you look at the current model, the government needs to listen to the concerns of the people and implement them as they are. And some will argue that the current model is narrow. It's very narrow to encompass every other concern of the people. And when you look at this, it is very true, because the model that has been adopted and enshrined in the Constitution does not give clear guidelines on how the public participation should be done. However, the government has tried to put in place other legal instruments to facilitate participation of especially the vulnerable groups. But it is not enough, because it is not reachable to the ground. Yeah. When you look at the regional instruments, when you look at the African Charter for Democracy, Elections and Governance, it actually pushes the nations to put in place mechanisms to facilitate public participation through digital media. However, there is still some loopholes. And this actually was tried to be addressed by the African Digital Transformation Strategy that has been in place, that actually gives guideline on actually the governments to put in place mechanisms for participation of especially vulnerable groups through media. And this channel should be accessible to these people. However, the government has been reluctant when it comes to implementation of the strategies that has been put in place. When you look at the parliament, it is actually mandated to facilitate public participation, but we have a challenge. The government only facilitates public participation in Nairobi. Now, what happens to other people in the marginalized area, in the villages? They don't get a chance to participate in this particular process effectively. However, we have the technology, but the parliament it is not facilitating, it is not putting in place mechanisms to allow everyone to to participate. Now, when you look at the level of penetration of knowledge when it comes to finance bill, especially in the interior, you find that those youth in the interior part of the country, they get the information through reliable rumors. Yeah, they don't get reliable information when it comes to participation, and that becomes a challenge, because you cannot contribute to something that you don't understand, and that actually informs the model through which these bills are being presented to the public. It is not palatable enough for someone to understand, for Mama Mboga to actually tell where she's supposed to contribute, because the model of dissemination, it is not favorable to people. And therefore, we need to relook into how we are supposed to promote this. When it comes to youth, I think the government should harness technology most of the time. Most of our youths, they're on technology, they're on social media, and that's where they get the information. And therefore, the government should put in place mechanisms that facilitate participation of these particular groups so that they can have their voice in these important and critical processes that affect their lives. We've had a challenge whereby politicians are only facilitating these processes so that we can appear, the youth can appear to be participating, but when it comes to incorporating their voices and their concerns into the document, that's where they draw the line.
Thank you, thank you, Brian.
Very dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. Of course, telling and bringing on board the concept of using technology, and of course highlighting that a lot of public participation, in your opinion, has been done in Nairobi and therefore does not go down to the grassroots. And of course, bringing also the concept about the information, how it's packaged, is not very youth-friendly, and therefore the people at the grassroots level, the common mwananchi, are not able to digest and understand and only rely on rumors. And Joseph, from an inclusivity perspective, of course, Zach had already highlighted that the model of public participation was not very friendly to persons living with disability and therefore hindered a lot of participation from this group of people. Do you agree with this, and what different can be done to ensure that everyone is included in this process of public participation?
Oh, well, thank you so much. I followed up what my colleague, Mr. Zach Nyange, highlighted. And I also following that the suit that public participation is not just about ticking the boxes, or rather, using it as a reference material that yes, we did the public participation, but rather, what is it that we've gotten from the public that needs to be put in consideration whenever we are drawing these bits, the finance bill discussions up to now that it was ascended to as an act, and again looking into the budget provisions that even the CS brought on board. Much of it, as my brother Sengeli and other people have highlighted, this revolves much about finance. It revolves around much. It revolves much on finance. There's economics and even accounting, and so it has its own language. The way law also has its own language. But we can, we need to have a sitting as stakeholders. These involve, and this is something that I'll be taking up with the National Assembly through KEDIPA, the Association for Parliamentarians with Disabilities. Because it is just about collecting 15 or 20, or if at all it gets a large extent 30 persons with abilities, then we say the public participation is done. No. How do we develop this discussion? Because the national budget is not about matters of the national people in Nairobi or those within the urban areas, but it affects even that person in the rural, because VAT will be subjected to each and every individual making a purchase of any product in the country. And so when doing public participation, one is the aspect of the documentation in terms of whatever we have. It's so painful that even the Senate, we have a senator with real person's ability, Senator Christopher Figu, could cry in front of the speaker that he's as her other colleagues were being punished with the rulings and the documentation in regards to the sessions that they have in the Senate. He's not punished with some documentation that is accommodative to her in regards to disability as a person with visual impairment. And that asks of you that whenever we're having this public participation fora, do these people ensure that the documentation that they wire on ground takes keen care of persons with disabilities, of those with, and taking care of the diverse aspects of disability, looking into those with physical disability, looking at those with hearing and visual disability, and those those also have take long to understand these issues take long to understand these aspects, are they being involved in this setup? Or are we brushing it the way, like if we can have a parliamentarian who can stand up and say that this bill will pass without an amendment of even a comma, then what's the need of public participation in that aspect? It looks as if we are ticking the box. We are holding this public participation fora just to tick the box, but not to get the full perspective and take keen care of these persons. So for the challenge is we must ask of accessibility issues. Can all persons with disability access the areas or the modalities that are being put in place in terms of enabling these public participation to work? Accessibility also stems on having, these discussions, the documentation. When you bring me the print material, are there Braille documents? Or if it is not in Braille format, is it provided in terms of, PDF format so that this person can peruse and it is not fully listed, kind of, so that everybody, that person who hasn't gone to school, ile sana, and is pata like 1 or 2 issues here and there. Then the third bit is about taking care of those with the hearing impairment. Are we having those who want to the sign language interpreters on board to cover up for the inequality that those with hearing impairment will face when they want to follow up this discussion? And so it stems around all these metrics, and I'm grateful that someone talked about the jargon. From the disability perspective, the jargons also come through because there's the language that those with hearing impairment understand, and that for us with physical or visual disability can't get to understand. And so whenever we are making these, whenever we are documenting all these, we need to have experts within this domain to take keen attention onto how to address these inequality issues and ensure that those persons with diverse disabilities are taken care of. Yeah. And in terms of making the pronouncement, it is painful. Can I get into the allocations, or that is something later?
No, we'll get to that. Maybe let's hold in your thoughts. We will get to that, and you'll have a chance to contribute. Now, let me bring on board Gashuki again. Now wearing your advocate of the High Court cap or hat, I just want to know, now that it has been said clearly in this discussion that the public participation happened, a lot of memorandum were issued, but at the end of the day, what was used in Parliament was the majority. The majority members of Parliament passed the bill without really considering a lot of the recommendations that the public had made in the public participation forum. So in your opinion, is there a way through law that this can be strengthened so that when there is a public participation forum, then the recommendations from the young people really count at that level of the final piece of legislation that comes out?
Thank you for that question. I'm Gashui. I can see Mpenya has also made that, has raised that issue.
Sorry.
It's okay. So as regards public participation and disregard for the same by Parliament, there have been instances in the past where legislation has been passed, but because of either lack of public participation or a disregard of the public's opinion on said legislation, the courts have had to throw out the legislation. And you can see right now as we speak, this particular Finance Act that was assented to has been suspended until further notice on grounds unconstitutionality. And when you look at the Mtata petition, one of the key areas he highlights in his prayers is the disregard for public participation. So insofar as public participation is concerned, it's just a matter of the parties. For instance, in this case, there are panelists who've talked about persons with disabilities. And I remember Brian Nyange saying that the venues or the mechanisms for public participations were not very friendly for persons with disabilities. Somebody else talked about lack of material resources, translators for persons with hearing impairment. And what you do as a party, as somebody who will be affected by said legislation, or just as a citizen of this country, you go to court and challenge the constitutionality of the legislation, the constitutionality of Parliament passing said legislation on grounds disregard for public participation. This is something that is provided for in Article 118 of our Constitution, and also I think Article 10 that talks about principles of democracy and governance in this country. Public participation is very, very critical in all aspects, and there is provision for the same at both county level and the national government level. So when the county government would like to pass legislation, they must involve the public at the county level, at ward level. When the national government also wants to pass a bill, when the parliament wants to pass legislation, they must involve the public. They mostly do that through advertisements on television, publication on local newspapers, and even on social media. And after that, residents, citizens are expected to present themselves and either orally or in writing submissions, they're called submissions, hand in their views on legislation that is to be passed. So the only way to strengthen, number one, is participate. And number two, challenge the disregard as an unconstitutional action in our high courts and higher courts, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, if things don't go well at the High Court and the Court of Appeal.
Thank you, Gashi, for that insight. I think it's very important that number one, you need to participate, and then secondly, you can challenge the disregard in the courts of law. Adrian has been very consistent. He's been raising his hand. I just want to listen from him in a minute before we go into the next level of this conversation. Adrian, please, you can hear me? You have a minute or so to make a contribution to this. Please unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to take part in this conversation. I'm of a different opinion because I feel however much the government might try to make sure that public participation reaches out to each and every individual, it's also on the other notice that the youths that are claiming to be involved in public participations don't really want to participate in the public participation. Because whenever you call for a public participation, it begins with the participants knowing of whatever they're going to discuss in the public participation. You cannot participate in what you've not gone through and digested. For instance, I don't really know how many people have taken their chance and gone through the Finance Act, because the Finance Act is a public property and anybody can access it through media, through the internet, anybody can access it. But I can attest that very few people went through the Finance Act and read through the 160-something paged book to get to understand what is the concept and the content of everything that is contained in that act. Unfortunately, that most of us, the youth especially, and most people in the village get to hear about the Finance Act because in our country, everything is politicized. So the moment it gets politicized about the financing bill, the fuel levy, everything, that is when people get enlightened of whatever is going on. People are always in the dark until something gets politicized. That is why it's very difficult for us to take part in a participation where you only get of political rumors that come depending on the political affiliations. Another thing about public participation, to the representatives that we send in parliament, it's very unfortunate that each and every person in parliament has a political side. So whenever the government is trying to bring out a public participation, anybody that is against the Finance Act will most probably not be part of the public participation, because politics in our countries is taken out of interest. So the moment the public participation is brought in the assembly or the floor of the house and you are against the government or you are in the opposition side, even the requirements and the documentations that are required for you to facilitate the public participation in your constituency will be an evil thing for you to undertake, because you'll feel like you are going against your party. It's another unfortunate thing that in our country, we live in a scenario where the role of the opposition is to oppose. They don't care whether anything is good or it's bad. It's just they're only just to oppose. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because, for instance, the housing levy. Housing levy is not a new thing in the flow of the National Assembly. This is a levy that was brought in by the previous government in around 2018, where it was brought in the floor of the House, the housing levy, and it was debated upon. And I can attest that some of the houses have been built and they're nearing completion. I've visited a site in Pangani where the affordable houses have been built. And by that time, when this one was going on, the housing levy was going on, President Ruto was now playing the opposition part of it. He was critically opposing the housing levy. It has come to an opportunity where now he's now the president and now wants to embrace the housing levy, and the other party that was embracing the same financial, the housing levy in the previous government, they are now the ones opposing the same thing. Why am I saying this? Because you'll find that each of the parties that are in this entranglement have been on the opposition side. The other side, President Ruto was opposing the housing levy. This other time, the other coalition is opposing the housing levy. So where do we need to lie? Where do we know whether it's a good act or it's a bad one? Because everything is politicized. The role of the opposition is to oppose, whether good or bad. Another reason why I'm saying this, there are some of the contents of the Finance Act that I'm fully in support with. For instance, the taxation on importation of fish, taxation on importation of furniture. I don't think it's necessary for us to import such things when we can do our local production here. But because somebody lies in the opposition, he'll definitely oppose it, not because it's a wrong concept, but because his role is to oppose. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Adrian, for bringing in a different perspective to this conversation around politicization of the Finance Act as well as the Finance Bill previously. And of course, bringing in the perspective of, again, whether the youth are actually interested in participating, in as much as we might fault the government, are the youth really willing to participate? Are they willing to sit down and listen and contribute meaningfully to this conversation? And maybe then the conversation should be, as our brother Brian had mentioned, Zach had brought out the issue about accessibility to information. And I would just want to bring him on, everyone. Zach, on this before we move to the next. Zach, can you hear me?
Sorry, you've been breaking a bit, so I did not get the question directly. So if you don't mind,
I can repeat. You had brought up the aspect of the public participation not being very conducive for persons living with disability. And therefore, just wanted to hear your thoughts about how different can it be done to ensure that a majority of the persons living with disability are also reached with this information that then comes out to impact their lives through legislation and policy.
Okay, so wow, trying not to repeat what others have already said, which I really love because I've been listening keenly. First of all, I'd love to appreciate the concerns that are brought by my colleague, and especially on what can be done for persons with different impairment, say those who are with hearing impairment, with physical impairment and such. And one great thing that someone also mentioned was about technology. If we reference on technology, then a lot of things would be sorted and sorted very well, because it's all about having this finance bill in a format that would allow one be able to probably read their chapter or their section, a certain section, and of course have their view. And technology is making things very sweet today, because apparently a high number of people in the country today, I may not be very sure of percentages, I've not done research, but then a good number of Kenyans today have smartphones. And so if it were put on an accessible format, whereby one would be able to say, for example, the act was about, the bill is about 150 some, actually 60 something pages. Now you realize that that is already a very big chunk of text for someone with intellectual issues, for example. So there's need for it to being done in a summarized version and by the government, so that the government does not leave the media to do its summary and then come to fight it that the media did a summary wrongly, that the media concentrated on this and that. So a summarized version from the government, probably maybe of a fewer pages, maybe 5, 10, 20, or whichever number, but at least smaller, to make sure that it is simpler for those, especially with intellectual impairment. And of course, that would definitely benefit even the Mawambogas. Secondly, the other option would have been having that summarized version also shared with different media, so that they would broadcast it in their different languages, for example. Royal Media Service, for example, has done quite a lot to make sure that we have a number of stations in different vernaculars. So you realize that those people would also have had a chance to listen through the radio. Third, they would have also done it through the different representations. I mean, say, for example, like the example given of my friend Crystal Asige, who happens to miss out a few items or to get it a third party, especially when when she's already in her office at the workplace. So if they happen to struggle doing it there, then you can imagine a totally blind man like me down here, how it will be for me. And even worse, live about me who is in Nairobi, someone who is down there in Isiolo, Turkana, Baringo and such places, how it would be for them. So fourth, then of course allow it to be transmitted in different media, so that, forgive me, we could have it in, say, Braille, like it was mentioned. We would also have it signed, like the government could comfortably have had it signed, a signed version of the same. And also the summarized version, like I'd already mentioned. And then now with all this, the government, okay, apparently we collect, even with the inadequate public participation that was made, all the things that were brought to board by the different participants in the public participation, most of them happened not to be considered. So that to me is already even a pullback, because if I'm sure that what I'm to share, then it may not also be considered, then I may also have a laxity of sharing any info. In any case, I know it will not be considered. So those would be some of the accessible options that would be there as options for the government. And maybe to elaborate just a little on the bit of persons with disabilities, it would be important to make sure that they are involved, so that you don't customize something for me and yet expect that I would be able to read with my screen reader, for example, and yet you are not, you do not know how that screen reader navigates, say, for example, on a document, a PDF document. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zach, for your recommendations. I think we are moving into a space where we are not only lamenting, but also giving recommendations of how this can be done differently to ensure that in the next cycle, we have more people participating, and not only participating, but participating meaningfully. The issue about creating enough awareness has come up, especially even including through local media stations, to ensure that this content is translated into languages that people can understand. And I know at the moment we have so many local radio stations across the country that are doing a very good job. And of course, the summarized version and bit of it for people, as you mentioned, of low intellectual capacity, to ensure that then this is information that can easily be read, understood, and from the government's own perspective, and not letting the media always to do the analysis and summary for the people to hear from. And so quickly, as we move into the next level, I think here now we are going to discuss about the budget estimates that were given by the CS of Treasury in Parliament. And of course, looking at specifically those that are targeting the young people and the youth. There's a number of allocations that were made into programs that would then go out into the youth. My friend Brian had already started mentioning some of them, including the Hustler Fund, the Youth Empowerment and Opportunities Project. And at this level, I just want to know, and that from you, Brian, we've previously had some of these provisions already in existence before, even in previous financial years. Of course, maybe with low resources, and now they've just been increased. Have they been impactful, in your opinion, these monies that have been allocated to different programs that are now targeting the youth? Do you think they've been impactful?
Thank you so much. So, you know, one thing that we have in this country is a cult of ignorance. And when you are ignorant, then it means that you're not going to benefit mostly from what is available. And therefore, I would say to some, it has been beneficial, but to some, it hasn't been beneficial. Why? Because we've had barriers. Now, when you look at the issue of availability of this particular mechanism, like for example, we have institutions that provide financial support to youths. We've had a lot of challenges as youths, even accessing those funds. Why? Because we have a lot of bureaucracies in those offices. You visit the youth fund and they request you a lot of documents, some of which you cannot, some of which even your father doesn't have. So if I come to your office and you're requesting that for you to give me a loan to start a business, I either need to have a logbook, which even my father doesn't have a car, or a title deed, of which some of the families even doesn't own a land. Then that becomes a challenge. And so some of these challenges have been impediments to the success of these programs. Another challenge is lack of awareness. We've had a lot of information going around that is not correct. So youth are not aware of the availability of this program, especially those from those marginalized areas. We've had youth from areas that the information is not reachable because there is no technology penetration in those areas. The government has not taken an initiative to put in place structures that support them to access this information. So you find that it becomes a challenge for them to benefit from these mechanisms. Another challenge that they've been able to encounter when it comes to benefiting from these programs is you look at lack of representation, yeah? And when you lack representation, and then it means that you are not going to have a say in key decisions. Like for instance, if you are passing a bill in Parliament, and this bill consists of a lot of engagement that supports the youth, but now those people who are there to debate on your behalf are older people. You can't expect an old person to debate on a point to protect the youth when they should be debating to actually protect their retirement benefits. So it becomes a challenge. So let's increase the representation of the youth. And I think the government needs to put in place mechanisms so that they can make it easy for the youth to benefit even from the opportunities they've been able to put in place for them. They are quite ambitious, and I know that most of the government, most of the time, when it comes to something like a finance bill, you find that there are major issues or major aspects that the government need to put in place. But when it comes to supporting the youth and other groups that are vulnerable, you find that the aspects are just thrown in as aesthetically or as by the way, just to lure their participation and their support. And that's why now we're having this issue of
thank you, Brian. I think
this issue of
Brian,
youth,
maybe even as you also conclude on your thought, I just want to get that point of the mechanism. What exactly do you think should be done? Because we might not come back on you on this because of time, but what are the mechanisms that you maybe would propose?
Okay, even before just I come to the mechanism, I would say that with the availability of these opportunities, I argue the youth, it is not guaranteed that you're going to benefit from them when you're not proactive and when you're not taking the initiative to ensure that you position yourself to benefit from them. So if you continue lamenting, then it means that you're not going to benefit from this. One of the mechanisms that the government should put in place is, as I had mentioned, leveraging on the technology. We have a lot of potential when it comes to technology, but when it comes to accessibility of this technology, it's a challenge, especially to the marginal areas, because we don't have the infrastructure for this particular technology. Another thing is the government should be able to partner with youth-led organizations, especially those that are found in the interior part of the country, because these are very vital in encouraging participation of the youth and also dissemination of the information. It is very critical for the government to partner with them. And then the government should also streamline the procedures and remove a lot of bottlenecks when it comes to accessibility of these benefits. So let's limit the number of requirements when it comes to accessing loans. Yeah, if I want to begin a business as a youth, give me very simple things that I can be able to access.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian.
Maybe as I finish, is the government should create a lot of awareness to this program and put in place legal and policy instruments that support it. We need to ensure that like for instance, Article 100 of the Constitution is not functional because the Parliament has not put in place a legal or a policy that supports it and bring it to life. So we need to ensure that we put in place mechanisms that supports the participation and inclusion of the youth in the political processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And now let me bring on board Joy. Joy, I know you might have gone through the provisions that are clearly aligned to the young people. Do you think this was enough?
Thank you so much. First of all, I think it was not enough. The government needs to do more in terms of what was the initial plan of the government for the youth vis-a-vis what is happening right now. Because if the government was to really leverage on the fact that the youth consists of the majority of the population of this country, then we wouldn't be having these discussions, wondering how then the allocation will be enough for the youth, how then the finance bill is even oppressing the youth that are not employed, because you find that in the finance bill, even the youth that are unemployed and maybe trying to earn from their intellectual property are being taxed. And so maybe in the future engagements, I would recommend that the government really goes back to the plan, the initial plan they had for the youth, and maybe just try to cover the loopholes that we have in terms of what my fellow panelists has just said, the access to these funds, the bureaucracies that surround access to these funds for the youth, the processes, are we sure that the youth at the grassroots level are able to go through all this process and get or access these funds? And also in terms of public participation, if this is a government that has the interests of the youth at heart, then how are they involving the youth directly? Why is the government using people who are not the youth to make decisions for the youth? And to just maybe finalize, I feel like the finance bill as a whole is not really favorable, as much as I have looked at it from both perspectives. My stand would be the bill, the act is not favorable for the youth. In fact, I feel like it rather expands social stratification between the people who are able and the ones who are not really stable enough to be able to pay all those taxes that are stipulated in the act. Yeah.
Thank you for that contribution. And of course, bringing on board that the government needs to go back on the plan that they had for the young people, and of course doing more to ensure that they are able to meet then their intentions that were there previously for the young people. My friend Brian has brought up about the issue about eligibility, awareness creation, and all that. And maybe now to bring Joseph on this, yes, some of the provisions that the government has given to young people require some skills. Some of them are business related. And do you think the young people have the required skills and mentorship that is required for them to take up these monies that are meant for them and actually build something meaningful out of it, or just ends up being wasted and therefore nothing impactful at the end of the day for the young people?
Thank you so much. Hope you can hear from me.
Yes, can hear you.
Yes, numerous cities or funds have been put on board to support youth development in terms of tapping into the scope of entrepreneurship. But again, not all of them can fit into one scope or one prospect in terms of entrepreneurship. It's diverse. But now the challenge that we have, one is that the funding is there, and the scaling in terms of it has been like apportioned. The amount that these people can get to access to support their development in terms of those prospects is limited. Look into how when Honorable Ruto and Gachagua were campaigning towards the election last year. It was much into rolling out Hustler Fund to support the business enterprises of the lowly. Looking into what the package that Hustler Fund has brought on board, it's commensurate to your transaction, and this gets to limit a number of those who will want to take at least a good amount that they get to invest in their business, invest into their businesses and see whatever they can plow back in terms of profit and get to pay back on these loans. And another thing is that with these cities that are there, how do we ensure that the taxes that are brought on board get to support, and this is the policy set, get to support the the enterprise these persons get to establish. Look into now the proposal that came for those who ventured into digital content creation. We are a full generation, and with the 75% plus of population of this country being youthful, these are people who have tapped into the power of the digital economy, and they want to venture into that, at least get an income, because most of them are shying off from the blue collar job. And the challenge is now the high taxes that are being brought on board. It doesn't stand out as a mode that will enable the sustainability of the enterprises that these youth will get to establish, because again you've given me the kitty in terms of to help me finance this enterprise. But now the taxation measures and even the policies in terms of the lines that are there are not supporting the existence of these businesses. And so it will crash. And I won't see the value of this loan or this financial kitty that we brought on board. And so it calls for us to go to the drawing board. And I'm glad Senator Sige is following this up through the business startup bill that they are fast-tracking in the Senate, which was initiated by former Senator and now Governor Sakaja, onto how to give these startups some a moratorium so that they can get into the tax bracket after they are sustainable enough to even create employment for others, because we must get into a platform where these MSMEs that are youth-oriented, youth-led MSMEs can stand for themselves and also be a mode for employment creation and support, the development of the country from an entrepreneurship perspective. And this goes into the taxes, this goes into the policies, and even opening up the financing model that we put on board. When we look into other prospects, especially on the skilling bit, I work with the young people, especially those with disabilities. One key thing that stands is the skill development. And the challenge that sometimes I get experience is that you find that you have entities that sometimes want to support the enterprise development for young persons with disabilities. But now you can't just fund anyhow. You must look into, if I get to fund this idea, will it get to sustain itself in the next 6 months? Or will an entity want to be financing this idea in 6 months, in each and every month? No. You must look into, can this person get to manage? Does he or she has the prowess to get to manage this enterprise, that if you give him or her a grant or a small loan, they can be able to take care and ensure that if you give them even a grace period of 6 months, then after that they can get to repay back that loan modestly and ensure that they get to build these enterprises to the long term. And so it calls for us. It calls for us to establish as organizations to look into how to support the skill development from a diverse perspective, taking even care of the disabilities, so that at the end of it all, we not just into I've gotten the certification from a school institution or an education institution, but rather, what are the additional skills that I've gained that can enable me, if I haven't been able to secure employment from the word go, I can venture into into entrepreneurship and make a standalone investment that can able to take care of me and take care of the other issues that I'm handling out there.
Thank you for bringing out that perspective. Of course, highlighting that it's more of a give and take. Given some resources to do business, but on the other side, the taxation has become a heavy burden on most young people, and therefore making their investments unsustainable. And now to Ali, I don't know whether Ali is still on call, but I just want to know, the Hustler Fund has been rated as one of the top achievements by this administration. And even looking at this budget estimates for 2023-2024, 10 billion has been allocated to the Hustler Fund. And in your opinion, Ali, do you think Hustler Fund has been effective to this end?
Thank you, Bwana Moderator. I think, to my perspective, is that I think there was no need of setting the Hustler Fund, as far as we have other youth dockets like Wezo Fund and youth enterprises, youth empowerment centers. I think the Hustler Fund, it was just a cash, or let's say a budget that was set aside for the president himself and the Kenya Kwanza coalition to show us that among their agendas was implemented, because they say they were doing a bottom up. But setting aside 10.0 billion for Hustler Fund, it was not, because it is not easily accessed by the local Mwananchi. You have to apply this Hustler Fund through maybe a gadget or any other material that is supposed to be applied. But for me, Hustler Fund, it was not a good initiative for us, especially the youth, especially our people. At least they could have generated this 10 billion to Wezo Fund, to other Million Youth Fund. At least it will be assist us. For example, now I can see here there is a 13.1 billion for National Youth Service. For what reason National Youth Service to be given 13 billion while Wezo Fund and Youth Empowerment and Enterprises Fund, Wezo Fund, it was given only 192 million, in which there is a game of a cat and rat between this Hustler Fund. How do we know that this 10 billion shillings will be used or will be utilized by our youth, our women, and our people from the ground?
Thank you, Ali. And now I'll bring in Zach on this also to just weigh in and think and give us a perspective of whether do you think because the Hustler Fund came in as a digital way of accessing government loans. And in your opinion, Zach, do you think this has been more effective as compared to the other traditional forms of accessing government loans? And do you think this is the best way to go, or are there better alternatives to ensure that then accountability in as regards to accessing these monies that are set aside for youth is met completely?
Well, thank you a lot again for giving me the opportunity to put my voice into this. And well, I'm on the issue, not specifically the government, but I must say that my opinion, Hustler Fund was not a priority to me. Why? Because according to me, and according to also the knowledge I have this far, as much as I'm not a lawyer, is that the government is supposed to provide policies, acts, and just guidelines so that to enable businesses to run. And so when we have Hustler Fund, when we have other institutions, say for example, TALA, KCB, M-Pesa, and blah, 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 there are many. When we happen to have Hustler Fund, to me, it comes in to be more of, quote unquote, a competitor of the other forms of business, for a lack of a better word. And it's not a good deal for me. Secondly, about its management. Now, like one of my colleague panelists is sharing, is that, you need to make sure that the country has trust with what you already have before even ending up to bring in some other issues. So we did have the issue of management, of who is managing the Hustler Fund, for example. So if the government itself is the one giving, or rather getting and managing the same Hustler Fund, to me, I don't find it right. Well, maybe if I could say, I'm not an economist, but my way of approach for all this would probably, my thinking, that we make a friendly environment for business. Government want to collect as much money as possible from the mwananchi so that it would be able to run different projects. That's okay. But then my opinion would be you make the business environment friendly so that more people participate into the business, we have more people coming up with businesses, the smallest ones, hata kama ni baba shop, the mama mbogas, wafungue more vibandas and all that, so that now you have more people to collect tax from because they are already running businesses. Say, for example, if they reduce the issue of, say, electricity, then it means that there may be more of salons that would run because people would be able to afford electricity. If they reduce, say, for example, fuel, then it would mean that the cost of transporting things from one place to the other would go down, hence bringing the cost of those items also down. Say, for example, if it is the construction materials, then they'll go down. And then it would mean that if I, Zachary, am constructing a certain house somewhere, then the cost shall go down. And it means that more people will be able to construct houses, more people will be able to open up businesses. And with more businesses, then there will be more people to pay taxes, rather than increasing whatever that is available, hence pressing the current available businesses that are already struggling. And then at last, making those people only have a hand to mouth because they can hardly do much. But then to those very big doing businesses, for example, or other institutions, you realize that they are giving. I really felt bad when I saw a policy, I don't know, that I don't know how to best call it, but a waiver for anybody who is withdrawing $1 million plus being brought down. And yet, you know, it is clear Zachary will not go to withdraw $1 million today and another $1 million tomorrow and another $1 million next week. I mean, so most of the things that are being done are not necessarily for 190. That is my opinion.
Thank you for that contribution. And now I want to bring on board Gashui. Hope this time around I pronounce it right. Gashui, one other area that has been funded heavily, that was funded heavily actually in this budget, was housing. And the government has clearly said that a lot of why they are doing this is also to create employment opportunities for young people. But again, there's the question about politicizing the same issue around housing and where the houses will be built and all that. And they fear that the people who are actually targeted, the young people, might not get the jobs at the end of the day, as has been promised by government. And so what mechanism can you propose, or in your opinion, would help solve this? And then secondly, just another one, do you think we have enough policies that can ensure that accountability of all these funds that have been set aside for young people are actually going to get into the young people as envisioned by the government?
Thank you for your question. Hope you can hear me. And you've pronounced my name correctly. Thank you. As far as the housing levy is concerned, it has definitely been politicized. But at the same time, again, you remember my opening remarks, the bill is good, the intention is good, the policies are good, the timing is wrong. Okay, so insofar as the housing levy is concerned, first of all, even from a youth perspective, not just a citizen perspective, the timing is wrong. I don't want somebody to come and deduct 2.5% of my income, and the prices of fuel are not going down, the prices of food are not going down. It does not make sense. A lot of what they're doing is very self-defeatist or self-destructive. Insofar as employment is concerned, one of the ways to ensure that this housing levy, if it actually proceeds, how to ensure that youth are benefit from this is mostly, I would suggest, at the ward level. Now, for instance, once the government, the national government, in conjunction with the county government, is able to map out areas where they're going to be constructing these houses, constructing all this infrastructure, at the ward level, through the MCAs, through the governors, through all devolved leaders, they should be able to produce lists of youths who are unemployed, youths who are seeking out employment. And I'm saying this because, and I hope somebody agrees with me on this one, the most powerful voice in the elective sphere is the member of county assembly. And that is even the most accessible one for every resident in this country. The fastest person you can reach is the chief and the MCA. So at the ward level, it is easier to benefit from these opportunities that might come about. And it is important, again, for the president and the governors to engage MCAs and even the chiefs through provincial administrations to ensure that young people in every part of this country are not just included, but participate and benefit from development of the infrastructure. Do we have enough policies in place to ensure that these allocations can actually reach and benefit our youths? I think we do have enough policies, enough legislation. We just have a very apathetic demographic. young people. And you know, the most interesting thing is, again, we are the most literate insofar as generations are concerned. People between ages 35 to 18 are more literate today than people within the same bracket 30 years ago. So in terms of access to information, it is now upon us, young people, to try and find out where can I get information and how do I hold the government accountable from the ward level, going all the way up to the national government. There is enough legislation, there's enough everything. There is one thing that I don't see, however, you've not asked this of me, but I just wanted to comment on the allocation that were given in the budget. A lot of what we are seeing just addresses micro business enterprises and creative spaces. I'm very concerned because I don't see enough allocation or even issue with young people and their participation in science and technology. I mean, Wambura, at the end of the day, I think if less than half of the population participates in sports, participates in creative, in the creative industry, in the creative spaces. So what happens to the rest of us? What happens to the person who would like to be a microbiologist? What happens to the physicist who would like to build something in say, TESOL? What happens to those? Where do we have allocation for science and technology, and insofar as the youth and their pursuits to that end are concerned? So yeah, those are my comments so far. But insofar as policies are concerned, we have enough. We have more than enough. Just a youth that needs to wake up. Simple.
Thank you very much for that. And I think that's a good point to note as well. The funding, especially towards the other youth, of course, in science and technology and other areas that may have been mentioned. And I think at this end, I also just want to, even as I give Adrian again a chance, because his hand has been up again, you said very well that laws are there, policies are there. Do you think there are any other things that then affect the accountability as far as this resources getting to the real people is concerned? Is corruption an issue? Maybe let me hear out from Adrian as we progress, as he also brings on board his thoughts. Adrian?
Thank you once again for giving me this chance. And I think I'll pick from where you just left on the matter of corruption. I think we are all living in denial, but I think we just need to wake up and accept that the biggest monster that we are facing as a country as at now is corruption. Corruption is the biggest monster that is derailing everything that comes up. However much everything might go through, the bill might be enforced, but whenever there's corruption, we might not feel the impact of our taxation. Another thing on what my fellow panelist has talked about the scientist, about the invention and the creative industry. To talk on the same, I think there is a board that is in place that I think Vision 2030 that was initially chaired by the great Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi. I think when we talk of Vision 2030, there is no old person that should be captured under that same ministry. Because whenever we talk of Vision 2030, it's a vision that only lies in the hands of the youths. So I feel like the youths that are gifted and they're innovative would greatly fit in the Vision 2030 board, as much as it does not mean directed to them directly, but I feel like we are the main audience. So whenever I feel like we are that innovative, I think that is the way to follow. On the matters legislation and the policies are there. But the fact that the citizens are not enlightened on the policies, the legislators take advantage of their ignorance. Because not that we don't have enough policies, but we need to be enlightened on the policies. As far as we here in this panel are aware of everything that takes place, we are more enlightened, we get access to everything that takes place in the country. We need to take it upon our initiative to enlighten our fellow youths back in the village who feel like boda is the best investment we can have. It's very sad, but that in the village, most of us in our age bracket would opt to drop out of school just to venture into boda industry. It was largely faced in Kakamega County and maybe Busia to some extent, where youths opt to go for boda. It's a stage that everybody goes through in life, the adolescent stage. That is where most of our youths lose direction, and where there is not enough counseling, they lose direction and we become lamentators. I don't wish that we remain in writing a book of lamentation, because it's not the right way to go. We might get out of this youth age bracket and get elderly while still lamenting. We should take upon our own initiative now that we have the information, we have the idea, and increase the knowledge base of our youth bracket. On matters taxation, I think as a good student of economics, there is a concept of taxation. And when you talk of taxation, there are only two ways where a country can increase its revenue. It can increase its revenue through raising taxes or raising the tax base. I need to agree that our government used the wrong approach. We need to increase the tax base so that we have more taxpayers, not to increase the tax when we need to collect more revenue. So that might be a wrong path that I should acknowledge, as much as I serve in the same government, but it's a wrong path that we took in matters raising revenue, as much as we still need the revenue to facilitate the budget. Whenever we go out for campaigns, every political coalition campaigns on an agenda. Whenever you campaign for an agenda, if you succeed being elected into your elective post, you need to fulfill your agenda. The moment you are now elected and you need to fulfill your agenda, there is an incurrence that you need facilitation in order for you to fulfill your agenda. The question is, how do you get the facilitation on fulfilling your agenda? Because at the same time, you'll not go back to the citizens and convince them that I didn't do this and this because I lack this and this. So you need to generate very creative ways on how you can maneuver and collect some revenue in whichever means. But facing the bull by its horns by getting into the wananchi's pockets to get money out of them, especially when the country is facing an economic crisis. We are just out of COVID, and now this one comes out loud and clear that we need to fund this government. It's a bitter truth that as much as we need to do that facilitation, it's very bitter. It's very bitter to accept that we need to fund this budget.
Thank
maybe,
you. Thank you.
It's okay, maybe.
Maybe your last statement, if you have.
I'll do my final submissions if
you could finish.
I was just to touch on.
All right, I think go ahead.
You're asking a question?
No. I just wanted you to make maybe final submission as well.
My final submission is that as much as we expect the government to get down into the local mwananchi back in the village, we should also help the government, because we are one country, we are one Kenya. We need to have one agenda of making sure that everybody gets access to information. And the persons with disability, I feel very sad but that our country has found it very difficult to embrace that special group. Our country only started embracing persons with disability in Kibaki's government, because the moment he got into that disability state, he felt like there's a gap. And that is why he was fighting over to leverage and at least make them feel involved in the proceedings of the country. But the moment that one went through, we've now faced a challenge of implementing the same, because everybody seems to be ignorant about the persons with disability, and they find it very difficult to fit in this society. And it's a sad part that we have taken as a country, and we need to change that perspective and gain a better knowledge on how to embrace these people as our own part of the family.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And now as we move towards the winding up on this conversation, I just want to point out something, and then maybe Joy, you could help us digest this. Many times government has offered funds to the young people, but there's always been this conversation and debate about is it the young people who, especially with companies, that get these monies, or there are other people who use the young people as a bait to get this money. You get maybe another person who has a company, uses the name of the young people to register companies, and then they end up benefiting and just leaving a little chunk of the whole monies to themselves. How can we eradicate this maybe so that these monies, if they are meant for companies that are youth-led, then this actually goes into companies that are youth-led? Joy? As you also give us your final remarks, maybe.
Thank you so much. Well, as I had mentioned earlier on, and my colleagues had also mentioned, I think this calls for us to stop the lamentation as the youth of this country and just take up the space that is rightfully ours. In my own lived experience, I feel like I have seen the government put out advertisements for the youth maybe to apply for something, and then you'd find, of course, it's inevitable that the older generation would also just apply, and then they discourage the youth in the sense that wamefanya my youth already. We think if you're not connected, you will not get something. And so we are rigid in our mindsets. We are rigid in how we approach most of these things by the fact that we already decided, hii kitu bila connection, siezi pata. But then my clarion call to my fellow youth would be, how about we just focus on taking the space that is supposed to be ours in terms of staying informed, as my fellow panelist has just said a few minutes ago, that how are we expanding our knowledge base? Do we know these advertisements, if it is advertisements? Do we know these funds that are available for the youth? How then can we plug ourselves into the different funds? Are we even in those groups? Do we know the youth that could benefit from these funds if we will not benefit from them directly? Because sometimes we could be talking about the youth, and yet we are just talking about the youth that are learned, us who are in this space right now, who are discussing the finance bill. But then what is our responsibility as the youth who have this information in terms of holding the other youth, holding their hands and just getting to let them know that there are these funds available, and for you to get these funds, this is the process and this is how you go about it, and you go with an open mind, even as we are sure that we live in a country that is dealing with a lot of corruption. Corruption has become like a disease in this country, but then we should not give up. We cannot give up on things before we even try on them, before we even say this fund is not working for the youth. How many of us have tried to apply or tried to plug our self-help groups at grassroots level into these funds? We should move from just merely speaking about it, but putting it in action. If we are talking about public participation, what are we doing as the youth to involve ourselves in government processes? Because I feel like we are living in a generation where we can only make noise on media. We can only talk about the problem. But when it comes to addressing the solution, when it comes to finding the solution to that problem, what is our role in finding the solution? What is our role in addressing the problems that we face as the youth? Because most of these issues will be solved by us. And when I say will be solved by us, sometimes we don't go aggressive. sometimes we just look down at the problem and say, if it is the Hustler Fund, so then how many people know about the Hustler Fund in our communities? Because it has to start from a level. The advocate said that these processes go deep down mpaka pale kwa MCA, because that is now the SI unit of the government. How many youth are plugged into their MCAs? How many youth are even how many youth even have the knowledge of the funds available at county level, leave alone national level? How many youth are able to access these funds, even as much as we are talking about the bureaucracies and the processes that are very difficult for the youth? It is time for us to take up the space that is ours and be responsible about the funds that are supposed to be ours and push the youthful agenda forward.
Thank you so much, Joy, for that information and contribution. I think at this level, before I give other panelists a chance to make their final remarks, because I don't want us to pull this beyond the time limits, I just want to know whether there's any other person from the audience, one or two, that I can give a chance to make a quick contribution before we wrap up this, because we appreciate their staying with us on this call. So maybe if you're there in the audience and you have something you'd want to contribute, you could raise up your hand so that I could see you and give you a chance before I give the other panelists a chance. Well, looks like our audience is satisfied with the contribution that has been made, and they do not have any other thing to add on that. And so I now at this level give a chance to my panelists to give a final word in a minute or a minute and a half as we wrap up this conversation. So I'll start with Gashui.
Thank you, Wambura. My closing remarks are, first of all, I'm a bit concerned with young people's response to the Finance Act, our participation, our voicing or vocalizing our opinions and reservations on the same. I am concerned about the allocations that are made and what I've just talked about with science and technology. And the reason why I'm bringing this up again is a lot of what we see is young people are just tokenized in this country or used in a tokenism manner to just ensure that the government is compliant on paper, but not so much to ensure that young people actually contribute to national building. So I wish and I hope that our greatest takeaway from this conversation, for those who might oppose, agree with the bill, from every sector that we come from, we are able to emphasize to young people and all stakeholders, all players, or everyone involved in this issue, to ensure that young people are not just tokens in a conversation as regards governance in this country. We are citizens of this country, we vote in this country, we pay taxes in this country, and we expect to be involved in decision-making and national building. So to that end, I am hoping that in the next financial year, for one, we get to see a big allocation, a big chunk of the allocation going to science, technology, and insofar as manufacturing is concerned, because again, I am not an economist, but I am noticing that a lot of what I'm seeing here is a very consumerist approach in terms of our budget and what we are getting in the allocations. So that is my takeaway and my comments, and I hope we all do better. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And maybe the other ones in 30 seconds because of unavoidable circumstances. So I'll give Ali 30 seconds.
Thank you, my brother. Maybe my call to all of us is, let us not provoke of what we don't know as youth, and let us avoid the hearsayings that are there. Let us do follow up to these things like Uwezo Fund, Youth Fund, and all the funds that are set aside for the youth. And it is good for us youth first to to make sure that we do follow up to these things, because some of us saying, I don't know about this, I don't know about this. You didn't do follow up. You didn't follow up for the money or for the act or for the public participation, then you are lamenting. So it will be good for youth to act than to speak, my fellow. And I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ale. Joseph?
My clarion call to my fellow youthful compatriots is that you can't have your cake and eat it. For our welfare to be taken care of in terms of governance, especially in the governance space in this country, we can't really put at the same time hope. So just take up the space, however tough it is, however the situation is demanding and involving, so that we claim a stake for our future, so that we own it up, we have our share. You have our stake.
Milton, kindly mute your mic. Milton. Proceed. Yes.
Oh, yeah. So that at the end of it all, we are not sellouts in our own system, but rather we have that standalone engagement and involvement to that which pertains us, and we get to partake all that involves our development. I'm very grateful. Thank you, my brother Elvis. Looking forward to advancing this much further. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
I think for me, I would say, since the youth form the majority of the population in our country, if we rise up and claim our places, then it will make a very major difference. We always insist that we are the leaders of today, but in reality, we are not. We're the leaders of tomorrow. But we are the government to give us the tools so that we can shape the tomorrow that we want. So encouraging the youth participation in governance is actually essential in any sustainable development and thriving economy. And therefore, the government should recognize our challenges that the young people face, address the barriers that exist, and implement the strategies that has been put forth. And by doing this, I want to assure you that we shall have a very prosperous society that encourages and accommodates each and every person's perspective and voices in the political processes and all other aspects that are key in making a difference in their lives. And therefore, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. And now let me give Zach also a chance in 30 seconds to give a final word.
Thank you again, and I'm privileged to participate into this. Mine are few, and exactly in the 30 seconds. One, that youth, we need to be in a position to make sure that we get to learn before we complain, because we need to be able to interact with the different provisions that already exist, so that it becomes possible that we have a louder voice with the truth, armed with the knowledge. Two, then I think that we should also see what we can do. As much as we may expect a lot from government to do its part, then we should also try our best, whatever we can do today and now. That is, if I happen to participate in a certain discussion, am I misleading or am I guiding? Am I provoking or am I involving? So we need to be involved in a manner that is informative and not a manner that is, not a manner that is just provoking people. And three, I would urge that the government to not just decide for the youth, but also involve the youth in the decision and in different aspects that it would want to involve the youth. Four, I'd love to also encourage that the youth need to avoid any form of corruption, so that it becomes possible that we fight corruption among the very entities that are already, rooted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zach, for your contribution. And thank you all for tuning in and staying with us throughout this time. Our panelists, Ali, Gashui, Joseph, Joy, Brian, and Zach, We really appreciate your time and taking time to help us digest this conversation. And to the other audience that has been following this conversation, both on Zoom and on YouTube, we really want to thank you for staying with us throughout this time. And remember that this conversation has been brought out to us by courtesy of Center for Multi-Party Democracy Kenya, CMD Kenya. And we'll also appreciate their partners, Uraia Trust and Danida through Royal Danish Embassy. We are really grateful for the support and making sure that the young people have a chance to consistently communicate and interact on issues that affect them and affect their daily living. So at this level, I really want to thank you all and to say that this has been a very insightful conversation. I know CMD Kenya is going to take up recommendations that have come out of this meeting, and this will form part of the documentation that going forward will inform the work that CMD Kenya is doing, and not only at CMD level, but at the national level through their networks. I thank you very much. And at this level, I would just want to ask all of us now that we can leave at our own pleasure. I've been your moderator, Elvis Wambura. Asanteni sana. Until next time.
Asante sana. Happy weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Evans, for the facilitation.
Thank you so much, Elvis, and the ultimate CMD.